So yeah, how have you been? How are you doing? How's things going with yourself?
I'm good. A weird few months, but it's one of those things where I'm lucky to have the kind of support network around me to get through a tricky few months that everyone else has experienced.
Yeah.
And then, just looking forward to like the future. Like even though 2020 has been a bit of a weird one, there's still 2021.
So was you one of those people that was like, right, 2020's writ off as soon as, you know, everything started going to lockdown, or did you kind of hold a positive mindset and be like, no, there's still things to be accomplished, there's still work to be done, or where was you at?
I've had a bit of a wobble. I'm not gonna lie, I've kind of leaned into the wobbles. I think it was like 4 months in, there was a moment where I was just like, what is going on? I had so many plans for this year. Like on February, I was on a very different path of kind of knowing where I was going. August was meant to be going to Edinburgh Fringe, making film contacts, theatre contacts, the whole shebang. It's all very neatly planned out.
Yes.
And then it was like, nope. But I'd say I'm kind of the type that tends to be an optimist, and also I'm a massive nerd. So essentially I used it to like upskill, do a lot of learning. I've been in quite a few courses recently, and essentially like I do try and keep a positive outlook to life and keep on like using this as an opportunity, even just to spend some more time at home, spend some more time with loved ones, and really show like like I think for a lot of like young creative women, it's really quite hard because there's so many demands on you all the time, but kind of having to smaller and like decrease your social circle. There's like more people you can concentrate on and really focus on building like those relationships, obviously, even with family. Like you should invest in time with like,
and I think
family.
sometimes the isolation, it kind of can be all consuming and all encompassing, and a lot of it's in your mind. So I guess it's amazing to have a support network, and I definitely want to get more into your network and more into the support and how you actually do it and get into the ins and outs of things. But I want to know, in your own words, what is the grind? What does the grind mean to you?
I really struggle with the grind just because I find it's I associate the grind with exhaustion.
Okay.
With like pushing yourself beyond your limits. So while that for me, that time is really interesting, and I've definitely been a girl on the grind before, pushing for that. I think there's times where I've also been like, I can step away from that, and that's not all I am. So even taking those moments of realizing that there's other parts of life that fulfill me outside of my career, like even for example outside of work I paint. That's as someone who has a lot of creative jobs and a lot of creative outlets through work, that's like the one creative outlet I have just for me. So it's almost like I think the grind is one of those things that I keep quite separate and compartmentalized for me. Like I really appreciate being in that space, and I kind of get into that headspace and have a certain way I work, which is about like when I'm a girl on the grind in a collaborative way, and working with a lot of other people and to uplift and empower the people. But then I like the kind of separate time where I'm a bit of an antisocial person and just would like to spend time on my hobbies and what actually just fulfills me as a person.
So how did you come to being able to work out the difference between Daljinder on a grind and Daljinder at home having a chill?
I think it was initially I started out my career in journalism and journalism exclusively, and I think in this day and age it's really hard sometimes to get a foot up still in certain industries, and it kind of, I hit that point, I was like doing long hours, and it was coming to the point where I just wasn't enjoying the creative work I was doing anymore. Essentially working for another person. It's why I then ended up going freelance, because when I was grinding all the time for another company, it just wasn't as fulfilling. So it was kind of what you said, the second of like a turning point, rather than something organic. It was a massive turning point in my life where I sat down and I was like, actually this is unsustainable for me, and actually I think it negatively impacts a lot of people, the kind of culture about just only being on a grind and having, for me I was like, actually I need to have those separate identities, and like you said, I've carved out spaces for me, so when I have my group of home friends, we're very much like, we kind of even have a time for work talk, but we kind of carve out time where it's just like hobbies, relationships, even just what we're watching on TV, we kind of keep it very separate, as we're all very much women on a grind, girls on a grind. My best friend is a very ambitious, very accomplished doctor, went to a cardiology conference last year in San Francisco, so she's on top of her game. I went along with her, but at the same time, even when we were in San Francisco, for her work thing, we made sure to keep that time separate for ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. So do you think there's a big difference between the personal pursuits that you have and the professional pursuits you have, or do you ever feel like sometimes there's lines where they cross over?
I think there's lines where they cross over a tiny bit, so like as someone who's into visual art and into painting, I have an understanding of what looks good, what it means to be an artist sometimes, and how inspiration works and things like that. However, I do keep my professional life quite separate.
So I want to know what has been your most recent spiritual awakening, if you have had one?
I can name one actually that's come up a lot recently. It was from watching Michaela Cole's I May Destroy You.
Oh yes.
So I read a lot from like her speeches and the interviews she gave, and it's really interesting to me as someone who's always helped facilitate creatives, but like on a community level, really worked with smaller communities, emerging artists, early career artists. I was listening to this speech she gave, the McPherson one, and it was about how there's not representation at high levels. So I've almost had that kind of awakening of actually, as much as I personally love working really closely with artists at kind of earliest stage of their careers, with independent artists, the spiritual awakening for me was realizing to kind of equip those artists better for the future, I also need to kind of start working at a bit higher levels. So what she talks about in the speech is essentially there's not enough people with the money, essentially, who look like us, who are telling unusual stories, who understand those stories implicitly just because they've had those experiences themselves. So
do you have any ideas around what we need to do as individuals and also as a community to kind of address that issue?
I'm a huge advocate for mentoring. Okay. So I'm really lucky in the past few months. I've had some great mentors from like quite high level, quite a range. So there's been like an independent film and TV producer who I've been meeting with, and has kind of done the untold little nuggets of information. So the stuff you pick up with experience. So it's not so much I have the skills in production. For like how to market, how to organise a set, but it's those kind of like networking, there's often nuanced parts there's nuance, even like presentation skills that you just don't pick up with the experience. But I've realised through my mentorship with him, or a mentorship I now have with the former festival director, kind of those skills I need to reach that high level, and that's why even myself I've started to look into a mentee, because for me I really think you can even have, I think it's called reverse mentoring, like even when it comes to mentoring people at higher levels or kind of experiences you might have as a minority in the creative industry. So even when it came to my mentor, there was a lot I could tell them about my experiences, and they understood. So I want to just discuss with you a little bit about where you're from, because you are not based in the West Midlands, but you work in and around Birmingham. So could you just tell me a little bit about where you're from and what it's like there? I always say to people, like, I sleep in Leicester. Essentially, like, my dad's family moved there in the 1970s from London. So originally, actually, he's a London boy. He's born there, but moved when he was really young. And when my mum got married, she is from Wolverhampton and then went to live with him. So I actually live in Leicester and stay with them for the moment. However, I spent most of my childhood running around Wolverhampton and Birmingham. Even like my uncle was in a reggae band, and I have a very musical family, so it would be going to their gigs, like even just during the daytime. I got taken to one too many bars, probably, for the age I was at with my sister, and given like McDonald's or something afterwards. Just to keep quiet, just in the corner. But like I've always had that love for the West Midlands and Birmingham, and like even if I've expanded my network, so I work a lot in Coventry now. I've done stuff with the Belgrade Theatre, appearing on their panels. They introduced me, actually, the artistic director introduced me to the independent artist I work with. For me, Leicester is always technically my home, but I think for me, I love meeting new people. I love making new contacts. I love supporting other new people as well, and kind of building my networks and being like, oh, you would work great with this person, or like this job is perfect for you. So that's why I've worked so much in Birmingham, and also I find it has like a great DIY culture. So it's not so much, there's this inclination to be like, well, we're not London, what can we do? And we don't have the money that London does. But even for like the people I've worked with and the people I've connected with, they've kind of put on their own events and created their own networks and created opportunities for other people. So I just love the city and I love the area.
So as a woman in business and as an entrepreneur, I want to know a little bit about what you think the future landscape of arts in the West Midlands looks like. And also, do you have any ideas of how women of colour can make sure that they're leading in the conversation, or that they're at the forefront of the change?
It's quite tricky because I think pre-COVID there was quite a positive trend upwards for more. I mean, like even I worked with the Poetry Music Night for Black and Brown Women NAMYWA.
Oh yeah, sure.
So obviously having a base in Birmingham was really great, and we had those networks. I think there is that still resilience against everything that's happened in 2020, and I do think that upward trend would peak up again with, I think, especially women of colour buying into that DIY culture that I mentioned before, and being empowered to put on their own events. So for example, even, and take opportunities. So like for the Birmingham Weekender, one of my close networks, 3 of the members of that little friendship group all were part of the Birmingham Weekender and programmed the last weekend of it.
Amazing.
Despite, and like as a friend of theirs, like I knew despite everything that was going on in their personal lives, they persevered and put on the extra hours, really also made a commitment to supporting young people, and then young people from particularly underrepresented backgrounds. So I do think despite everything, while there might be, I imagine, a bit of a dip in the opportunities that are out there and kind of the chances for arts and culture in the West Midlands, I know, and I have confidence in the people I know, like even the fact we're doing this, and confidence in people like you, that it will persevere, and I think we will create opportunities for each other.
So I want people watching to get a sense of what they can do for themselves to keep going, to keep inspired, to stay on their grind. And obviously there's been many insightful things that have come up in the conversation already. But I mean, I know people really want to hear, like, what do you do on a down day? How do you pick yourself back up?
I think for me, it's quite interesting with all the work I've done in mental health that motivation is something that's considered like inherent, and that's something you do and you just have automatically. For me, I've realised, and what I do for my bad days is realise that's not the case, and it's a case of me building up. So even achievement can be getting through my email inbox for a day. But I would say actually, if you're talking about a bad day, even if it's something like what I call input or inspiration sessions, so it can be just watching a TV show and sitting there thinking, what themes were there? What could I take from this? What could that inspire? Because as like a writer, so for the journalism I do, really thinking critically about what conversations are being had on screen and how this relates to the wider context, like even The Social Dilemma, the Netflix show recently. I watched that on a bit of an off day, and I was a bit like, oh, how would that, how could we have a wider conversation about that? So taking those sources of inspiration.
What was your take on that? What did you think about it?
It was quite funny because obviously I work in marketing as well. So at the same time, I sat there and was like, how can I, as a marketing person, enable other people to use social media in a healthy and productive way? So I understand the importance of it. It's helped me a lot in my career. But at the same time, as I was sitting there thinking, I was just like, I feel like with all my years working in it now, I use certain techniques, like even I only use social media at certain times of day, use my like laptop, because even like I do it for other companies, so I always keep that to certain areas, like only my work laptop, and I don't actually use my own personal devices for that.
So I asked before we kind of sat down today, and as we're preparing for the interview, I wanted to know about some of your top 5 achievements, and you sent them over, but I would love it if you could just talk to me about maybe your top 2 right now.
Okay, that's good because I can't quite remember them all. I think I did say it's like, it's such a nerdy thing to do, but I always like to do like one thing I'm proud of in the day. Like even like you said, for that motivation and that for that, or when you're having an off day. One definitely was in February winning an award for the show I produced. It was a Vault Festival show called Wig Snatch Perceptions Destroyed with the independent artist and comedian Erin Desi.
Boom. Can you say that one more time, please? Because I need that a second time.
Wig Snatch Perceptions Destroyed. Yeah, it definitely was something that caught people's eye and actually was a really interesting show. It looked at social media identities online through an intersectional, feminist, South Asian lens, and I'm in the LGBT plus community where I do a lot of work as well too. And even talking about disability, we're very good working together just because we come from quite similar backgrounds. We have that rhythm and vibe together. But I was really proud of that just because it was one of those examples where I just did it all myself, and we did it all together, and we didn't, like, obviously we went and got funding from other people, and but when it came to applying for that, we coordinated really well, created the space for her to be really creative and really fun when it came to making the show, and even I was really proud about the fact the cast and the crew were very inclusive, so it was majority people of colour, non-binary people, people from very different backgrounds, and actually for me it's really important to create those opportunities, not even just on screen or on stage, but behind the scenes.
How do you feel about the next few months coming out of whatever space we're in now with Boris's recent rules and with this current situation of the pandemic and just the creative art scene in general? There's been a great surge in funders and companies wanting to have allyship with minority communities more so than they did before. So I assume that there's going to be changes in the art sector and in the art scene because of that reasoning. But yeah, what do you see for the next few months for your business or for you personally?
I'm really excited. Like actually I did have my wobble, but essentially I've been introduced to more artists. Essentially I can't talk too much about it, but they're women of colour, and it will be adding to the support I can give to them. And the kind of learning I've been doing through programmes I'm on, the BF5's Creative Producer School, Opus, Outdoor Places and Usual Spaces is a great Birmingham organisation run by women as well, and I'm on one of their courses, and essentially all those little learning opportunities I'm taking that even people are like, why are you doing all this whole study?
Why are you being busy?
It's like, why are you adding more to your plate, Daljinder? And I'm like, well, I love it, but it's all informing the fact that I can go and take that knowledge and take that support elsewhere. So I'm really excited actually for the future.
Okay, great.
I'm quite open, to be honest. A lot of the work I do is quite tricky because it's all conversations, and then suddenly it all gets agreed, funding comes in, and then whirlwind. But I'm really excited about that. It's what I thrive on. I keep a balance of practical everyday jobs, like I've said, the marketing supports myself. I'm on a mentorship Cosmopolitan to do more freelance journalism, so to be kind of respond to the world we live in now, where I can't really do as many live events, so to return to that journalism and to pick up on that a lot more.
So as a South Asian woman, artist and creative, and person basically, how did you stand so strong and unapologetically with the LGBT community? How did you discover your voice in that?
I think it was by accident. Like it was at university. I think it was those voting forms they make you do for the student union. Someone went to me and was like, oh, you tick all the boxes. And I was like, yeah, like even when it comes to disability stuff or being working class, I was like, yeah, like identity wasn't something I really grew up with because my parents, like it affected me, obviously, but my parents never made it explicit. Like I went to quite a white working class school, but Leicester's quite multicultural, but I didn't know what an ethnic minority was. So it's kind of a very intense period during university. And then I kind of, I'm a nosy, curious person. So essentially when those terms started being applied to me, it was, I think the nature of even doing an English to French degree, my way of understanding the world is to do research and to do a lot of learning and to talk to people. What makes me,
why?
Yeah, it just makes it. What makes me like a decent enough journalist, producer, is asking those questions and finding out the answers.
Yeah.
And essentially, I realised I was quite even privileged with the background I've had. So to have a supportive family, and as quite an empathetic person, that's how I generally describe myself. I realised that I need to take those opportunities I've had to not have those terms weighing me down, or the fact of family pressure weighing me down. It does have an effect, but not as much as other people, and I need to use those opportunities I have to help other people.
Sure. If there's one thing that you could say to yourself age 12, what would it be?
Where was I even age 12? It's such a while back ago. Be a bit braver.
Be a bit braver.
So I think, I know it doesn't come across now, but I was a very quiet, very bookish, very introverted 12-year-old. I had like a lot of friends, but it was like one of those ones where you kind of had to get to know me to really get me as a person. I wouldn't change the way I was at 12 or the kind of the journey I've been on, because it's made me who I am.
Sure.
But at the same time, a lot of the opportunities I've had in my life is because I've been a bit brave, and like even when I was like abroad and going, talking to random strangers. I know that sounds really weird to say out of context, but like saying hello to people or taking opportunities that feel like a step above. And even when it came to me as a 12-year-old, I was busy doing the same stuff. When I look back on it, I think I was part of like launching a fair trade directory as part of the local steering community.
I love that.
So stuff like that, but I was always really shy and nervous about it, and not really empowered to actually go that step further in making change.
Well, I'm glad that over that time you stepped out into your own, and that you're continuing to strive in your area. Leaving the interview, I just want to talk again about the future, but what would you say to you when you're 30?
That's not that far off, you know.
Okay, well, no, we're not going to go any older than 30. We'll just keep it at 30.
I could do 30, but I was just like, that's so depressing to think about. I was like, I could see that more than 12. Just kind of keep being curious and nosy and like supportive of other people and ready to speak out. I think when you kind of hit 30, I think as a woman, and as a woman of colour, sometimes from certain like communities, it's like, and like even how do you find it now in the arts? Like as soon as you hit past 20, you're like old, essentially, and you're meant to have been like settled in your career, and you're meant to have all these terms. Like you're meant to have one thing that you do and you do well. Whereas I've always been the person who kind of tries new things. Like I've said, the film recently, I did a bit when I was in Paris and worked in Paris with the European Independent Film Festival, went to Cannes. That wouldn't have happened if I just kind of didn't go, let's go for it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been so nice.